At 23,000 feet, the air inside a Gulfstream G4 feels different. It is the rarefied oxygen of the 1% elite, a silent vacuum sealed by a ministry valuation exceeding $100 million. But looking out the porthole, the view isn't golden. It's terrifying. While the Rolls-Royce engines hum with reassuring consistency, the internal metrics are screaming. Digital engagement among Gen Z skeptics is free-falling, and whispers of sudden health scares are tearing through the charismatic evangelical circuit faster than a viral Reddit thread. Joyce Meyer architected a global empire on a binary transaction. Faith equals net worth. Radical giving equals radical receiving. But for the first time in 40 years, the prosperity gospel algorithm is glitching. The ledger is bleeding. Stop looking at the plane. Everyone thinks the controversy is about the jet fuel or the commodes. That is a distraction. The real existential threat is happening behind closed doors, involving a confession she never wanted to make. Before we crack the vault on this confession, press that like button and subscribe, because the algorithm buries the truth, but we uncover it. Now stop thinking about a preacher. Start thinking about a CEO. Joyce Meyer Ministries isn't a church. It is a media ministry machine with the logistical footprint of a mid-sized defense contractor. Headquartered in a massive fortress in Fenton, Missouri, this operation dominates the global syndication market, broadcasting to a potential audience of 4.5 billion via hundreds of TV stations. Here is the genius of the acquisition strategy. In the mid-90s, Meyer didn't just buy airtime, she psychographically targeted the disenchanted stay-at-home mom. While male evangelists screamed about hellfire, Joyce spoke to the depression of the suburban matriarch. She offered emotional validation. By 2005, she had converted that emotional capital into financial liquidity, transforming anxious homemakers into a power donor demographic. The operating system driving this revenue is the prosperity gospel, but let's call it what it is: transactional divinity. The mechanics are brutally simple. You plant a financial seed into the ministry, and God is contractually obligated to return a harvest of wealth to you. It is a spiritual slot machine where the house guarantees a win. But here is the glitch. This faith-based flywheel requires constant acceleration. The $100 million overhead, the jets, the salaries, the global conferences, relies on the assumption of infinite growth. When the seed stops yielding a harvest for the donor, the cash flow doesn't just dip. The entire empire, built on the promise of supernatural ROI, begins to cannibalize itself. The bigger the beast, the bloodier the starvation. Rewind the tape to November 6, 2007. The faith-based flywheel hit a steel wall named Senator Charles Grassley. This wasn't a spiritual attack, it was a forensic audit. As the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, Grassley launched an unprecedented inquiry into the Big Six media ministries, aiming to pierce the ecclesiastical immunity that had shielded televangelists from the IRS for decades. For the first time, the federal government didn't ask about theology. They asked about the $23,000 commode. This was the moment the narrative fractured. Grassley wasn't interested in heresy. He was hunting for excessive executive compensation. The threat level went nuclear. The inquiry demanded transparency on the private jets, the multi-million-dollar compounds, and the furniture that cost more than the average working-class donor's annual salary. While other ministers stonewalled, invoking the First Amendment like a legal riot shield, Meyer did the unthinkable. She opened the books. She complied. She joined the ECFA, Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability. Legally, she survived the regulatory siege unscathed. But victory is often a lagging indicator of defeat. While the Senate investigation didn't result in criminal charges, it successfully planted a trust virus deep within the donor base. This was the onset of information entropy. It wasn't that she suddenly lost millions of followers overnight. It was that the quality of the belief degraded. The cultural frequency shifted. The investigation coincided with the looming 2008 financial crisis. Suddenly, the recession-era viewer, watching their home equity evaporate and their 401k flatline, looked at the screen differently. In the boom times of the 90s, a $23,000 antique commode was aspirational. It was proof that the system worked. In the wreckage of the foreclosure crisis, it looked like looting. The cognitive dissonance became deafening. The audience stopped seeing God's favor and started seeing misappropriated funds. The transactional Divinity contract was breached. They realized that while they were praying for a miracle to keep the lights on, their spiritual CEO was renovating the bathroom on a private jet. The seeds of doubt planted in 2007 didn't kill the ministry then. They lay dormant, waiting for a new generation of digital natives to water them with cynicism. Then came the glitch that no one predicted. In a vertical defined by absolute certainty and dogmatic armor, Joyce Meyer committed the ultimate industry sin. She admitted she was wrong. This is the great retraction. After decades of preaching the prosperity theology algorithm, input cash, output miracles, Meyer walked onto the stage and dismantled the very engine that built her empire. She looked at her legacy donors and shattered the transactional Divinity contract.
"I'm glad that I didn't know what I know now," she confessed, her voice shaking the foundation of the movement. "I'm not going to tell you if you give, you'll get a check in the mail." The CEO of a multi-million-dollar enterprise just told her customers that the core product they had been buying for 40 years was defective. She admitted that the spiritual slot machine was broken. But here is the brutal irony of the pivot. Logic suggests this moment of radical transparency should have saved her brand. It didn't. It fractured it. By attempting to pivot toward biblical balance, she alienated the hardcore believers who were addicted to the dopamine hit of guaranteed wealth. They didn't want nuance. They wanted the magic formula. They wanted the spiritual lottery ticket. When she took that away, the value proposition collapsed. If you think she was right to apologize, hit that like button. Wait, it gets worse.
While the apology alienated the prosperity purists, it failed to convert the algorithmic skeptics. To the critics, this wasn't humility, it was a strategic hedge against declining ratings. They saw it as a desperate rebrand for the Gen Z demographics, who were already allergic to the polished veneer of televangelism. Meyer learned a harsh lesson in brand equity. You cannot alter your core product offering after 4 decades of market dominance. You can't sell people a Ferrari for 40 years, then suddenly tell them they should have been happy riding a bicycle. When you try to serve 2 masters, the truth and the algorithm, you end up serving neither. Ink, pain, and the Gen Z gambit. Let's calibrate the absurdity here. At 79 years old, an age when most legacy boomers are downsizing into assisted living, Joyce Meyer walked into a parlor to get inked. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rebellion. It was a strategic cultural pivot. By branding her skin with a cross and the phrase, "I belong to Jesus," she was attempting a high-risk maneuver to court the edgy Christian cohort. She was signaling to the modern believer that she wasn't just a relic of the polyester suit pulpit era. She was cool. She was free. She was with it. But let's decode the signal using the lexicon shift. This isn't just style. This is rebranding desperation. It is the Gen Z gambit, a calculated attempt to sanitize a reputation built on exclusivity by adopting the aesthetics of the counterculture youth. She is trying to trade the country club pastor vibe for biker church chic. But here is the glitch in the simulation. While the ink screams relevant, the biology screams collapse. The attempt to curate this cool grandma avatar crashes violently against the physical reality of her existence. We aren't just looking at a tattoo. We are looking at a body broken by the global itinerant circuit. Wait, the data gets darker. The narrative of fresh ink is a distraction from the medical charts. We are witnessing the real-time decomposition of a key opinion leader. The severe back issues, the multiple surgeries, the visible frailty. The spirit is willing, but the biology is failing. She has spent 40 years standing on concrete stages, performing for the mass market audience, and the physical tax is finally due. It creates a jarring, almost tragic juxtaposition. A fresh, permanent tattoo on a canvas that is rapidly deteriorating. Is this a courageous act of defiance against aging? Or is it a terrified scramble for algorithmic relevance among a TikTok demographic that doesn't care about her ink, only her obsolescence? This brings us to the most terrifying coordinate on the timeline, the succession vacuum. The tattoo is a cosmetic distraction. The reality is a structural single point of failure. We are witnessing the founder's curse in real time. In a standard S&P 500 corporation, you can swap the C-suite executive, reissue the mission statement, and the shareholder value stabilizes. But the ministry industrial complex doesn't operate like a franchise. You can replace the CEO of Starbucks, and people will still buy the latte. But here, the product is the person. The consumer isn't purchasing abstract theology. They are buying the specific branded charisma of Joyce. This is the personality cult paradox. The brand equity is entirely biological. When the face of the brand disappears, the value proposition evaporates. But here is the jagged edge of the graph. The transfer of power is failing. You cannot inheritance tax charisma. While the sons have stepped into the operational spotlight, the market sentiment is brutally clear. The donor class doesn't want the franchise. They want the founder. We are already seeing the quiet indicators of legacy erosion. Look at the forensic accounting. It starts with the subtle shifts in arena attendance metrics, then the discrete liquidation of real estate assets, finally the shrinking of the global ministry footprint. The sons are managing the decline, not fueling the growth. The brutal economic truth of the televangelism circuit is that the capital follows the magnetism. If the charisma is tired, the bank account freezes. The spiritual ROI plummets to zero, leaving a massive infrastructure with no engine to power it. The final verdict. This isn't a transition, it's the terminal velocity of the influencer life cycle. We are observing the ultimate stress test of prosperity theology against the unyielding logic of entropy. Here is the savage pivot. Is this a brand renaissance fueled by edgy aesthetics, or a slow-motion collapse recorded in 4K? The data suggests the latter. This is the Icarus paradox applied to the televangelism vertical. By tethering a multi-million-dollar media empire to a single human vessel, the organization didn't build a legacy, they built a ticking clock. The lesson for every digital creator watching is brutal, but necessary. You can scale your audience retention, optimize your funnels, and dominate the algorithm, but you cannot monetize mortality. The succession metric is the only KPI that actually matters when the camera turns off. She spent decades selling the blueprint for supernatural victory, but the final chapter is being written by natural decay. There is a profound difference between preaching unstoppable growth and living inside a body that has reached its depreciation date. The check has cleared, but the balance is zero.